Hola! My name is Anita Salfeld. Welcome to Spanish 1. Our first lesson is going to be los saludos or greetings. By the end of today's video, you will hopefully be able to introduce yourself and greet someone in Spanish. So let's get started. I'm going to say all of the greetings, los saludos, and leave you time to repeat so that you can if you want to. Don't feel like you have to. And then tell you what they mean. Hola! Hola means hi or hello. Buenos días. Buenos días means good morning. Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes means good afternoon or good evening. Buenas noches. Buenas noches means good night. Now, if you're wondering, is it good evening or good night? One little thing that you can do is to just say buenas. So instead of deciding is it tardes or is it noches, you can just say buenas, and that's totally acceptable. So you just say buenas, and that's it. Okay, so some polite questions that you may need, and keep in mind we have no vocabulary at this point, so our answers are going to be very polite and very short. You're not going to be able to elaborate. But once you know more Spanish, then you can elaborate more and tell people how you're really doing. So our questions are, ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo está usted? ¿Qué tal? Or you might also hear, ¿Qué tal estás? All of these questions are different ways of asking, how are you? ¿Cómo estás is informal. You would use it with friends or family members or classmates. ¿Cómo está usted is used in more formal contexts if somebody's your superior at work, if you're talking to a customer or a client or somebody that you don't know. It's always best to err on the side of caution and use the usted form. And then if they tell you it's okay to use the tú form, then it's okay to use the tú form. But you should always err on the side of caution. And then, ¿qué tal? ¿Qué tal estás? Are also informal ways of asking, how are you? So, right now, we don't have very many things that we can say. We're going to say, estoy bien. Estoy mal. Or you can say, estoy muy bien. Or, estoy muy mal. So you're saying either, estoy bien, I'm well, or I'm very well. Estoy mal, I'm doing poorly, or I'm doing very poorly. You could also say regular, más o menos. And both of those mean more or less okay. Regular, regular, okay. Más o menos means more or less okay. And then another question that you might hear or use is ¿qué pasa? ¿Qué de nuevo? ¿Qué pasa means what's happening. ¿Qué de nuevo means what's new. They're both kind of asking what's up. Now, there may be a lot of things up, but at this level, you will not be able to express them. So we're going to learn one phrase that may be true and it may be a lie. That's okay. These are socially appropriate questions. So a socially appropriate response is nada, nothing. Or if you want to be a little bit more sophisticated, you could say pues nada, well, nothing. And then you sound a little bit more native-like because that's a phrase that a lot of native speakers use. Okay, so nada or pues nada means nothing or well, nothing. And as you learn more Spanish, you'll be able to express yourself and actually tell people what's up, what's going on. Okay, so let's learn despedidas, how to say goodbye. You will probably already know adios. Ciao. You'll see there it has two accepted spellings that comes from Italian, and so either of those spellings is fine. Both of those mean basically goodbye. Hasta luego. That means see you later, or literally until later, but it's basically see you later. Hasta mañana, which means see you tomorrow. Hasta pronto. See you soon. And nos vemos, which also means see you soon. So those are how we could say goodbye or take leave of someone. A little interesting note about adios that I did not know for a very long time is that when I was on campus during my study abroad in Costa Rica, people would walk by and they would say adios to each other as they were passing. And to me that was weird and honestly a little, like it felt rude to me, like I'm just going to say adios, I don't want to talk to you, see you later. But actually this is a socially appropriate way, or at least it was in Heredia, Costa Rica, where I was studying. This is how you greet somebody when you're not stopping to talk. Say, adios. And it's not rude, it's not weird, it's not awkward. It's just, we're not stopping to talk, we're just greeting each other as we pass. I don't know if that's true in other countries, so your mileage may vary on that expression, but that's how it was used there. Okay, so how to introduce yourself and greet someone. We're going to learn a few questions and answers. First, ¿cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo se llama usted? Both of these are ways of asking, what's your name? ¿Cómo te llamas is informal if you're asking a classmate, maybe a family member that you haven't met. I have those. I have 8 gazillion cousins, and I haven't met all of them. But basically somebody who would be sort of your social equal. And then in a more formal context, in a business setting, or with your boss, or head of your company, or someone, a new client, you would say, ¿Cómo se llama usted? And the answer is, Me llamo Anita. Yeah, I have a lesson on pronunciation, and you'll see that that double L is always pronounced ya. Now this is particularly important with this phrase because if you say me llamo means I call myself. So I call myself Anita. Me llamo means I lick myself. So you want to make sure you're pronouncing that double L as ya instead of la. It's always ya. Okay, so next question. You can probably guess by the answer, Nebraska, that it's asking, where are you from? ¿De dónde eres? ¿De dónde es usted? So again, those are two ways of asking where you're from. ¿De dónde eres is the informal way, how you would ask a friend or classmate. And ¿de dónde es usted is the formal way. It's how you would ask maybe a teacher, a professor, a new client, a boss, etc. And then the answer is, soy de Nebraska. And then obviously you would substitute Nebraska with wherever you're from. But soy de means I am from. Okay, so after you've met someone, the generally polite thing to do is to say, nice to meet you. And the first two phrases are ways to say, nice to meet you. Mucho gusto. Encantado. Encantada. Okay, so should you use encantado or encantada? If you are male, you should say encantado. If you're female, you should say encantada. One of the things we'll learn with Spanish is that it always has to agree in number and in gender with whoever or whatever it's describing. So if you are female, you're saying, I am enchanted or charmed to meet you, pleased to meet you, then it needs to agree. So you're female, so the word has to agree with your gender, okay? And the same thing for if you're male. Okay, so mucho gusto, encantado, encantada. And then igualmente means likewise. And this is a very versatile word because you can use it politely, but you could also use it impolitely. So if someone says nice to meet you, you could just repeat mucho gusto. So if they say mucho gusto, you could say mucho gusto. But if you want to be a little bit more sophisticated, you could say igualmente. And that means likewise. Now, the nice thing about igualmente, like I was saying, is that if somebody says, hey, go jump in a lake, you could say igualmente. And you don't actually have to know any insults in Spanish to be able to insult somebody right back. The problem is that you would actually have to understand what they're saying well enough to know, so it's still a little bit of a problem, but it's a versatile word. Anytime if somebody wishes you to have a nice weekend, one of the phrases that my students always want to be able to tell me, and they're like, oh man, it's such a long phrase. So, if somebody says, have a nice weekend, you can say igualmente, and then you don't have to get out the whole phrase of have a nice weekend. So it's a really useful vocab word. Okay, so let's say you want to introduce someone else. If you're in a social setting or a work context, there are two ways to say it. You can say, te presento a Anita. Or you can say, le presento a Anita. And as you've probably figured out, one of them is informal and the other one is formal. Te presento a is informal, if you're introducing friends or classmates. Le presento a would be formal if you're at work, for example. That would be a good phrase to use. Okay, and then the blank is where you should put the person's name in. Okay, so some more polite phrases that you might find it necessary to use. In English, we have excuse me, and excuse me is very versatile, and it's used in a lot of contexts. But in Spanish, there's a bunch of different expressions that we use excuse me for. Okay, so first of all, con permiso. And con permiso is used if you are trying to get through a crowd or if you're trying to leave. Basically, if you're saying excuse me as you're cutting through people, that's con permiso. It's as with permission. And then perdón. Disculpe. And these are used if you're trying to get someone's attention or apologize. So let's say you step on somebody's foot as you're trying to cut through a crowd, then it would be appropriate to say perdón o disculpe because you're apologizing. Or if somebody's in conversation, you're trying to catch their attention, you might say perdón o disculpe, recognizing that generally it's not polite to interrupt someone, but it's really important, so you say perdón or disculpe. Another phrase that's more like I'm sorry, lo siento. Lo siento mucho. And that's saying I'm sorry. If somebody said I'm having a crummy day or my cat died, that would be an appropriate thing to say to them. Okay, it's expressing empathy. It's not necessarily expressing like perdona, disculpe, is like oops, that's my fault, I'm sorry. But lo siento is expressing more empathy instead of guilt. Okay, culpability. Okay, some others that you've probably seen before. Por favor. Means please. Gracias. Or muchas gracias. Means thank you or thank you very much. De nada. Means you're welcome. Okay, so these are the basic expressions. Now, the problem is that this is a video, and the way that we learn languages is not watching videos, unfortunately. It's using the language. So in order to be able to use these, you need to practice using them. If you already have people in your life that you speak Spanish with, then, you know, pester them, plague them, make them practice with you. Politely, of course. Use the usted form. No. But the other way, if you don't have anybody to interact with, this is a nice site. It's free. You can go and interact with native speakers, and it's a language exchange, basically. So, you know, you interact with a native Spanish speaker who's also trying to learn English, and so it's a nice way that you both get practice in the language, and you both get exposure to the language. You both get conversation practice, so it's really nice and it's free. So this is a way that you can practice. Adiós, nos vemos.